Welcome, Richard. Good to see you again. How are you doing?
Hi Kim, good. Thank you very much. Look forward to another chat.
Yes, absolutely. And thank you to our listeners who are joining us here, the Balanced Mind podcast, where we have spreadsheets meeting our emotional and mental world, our inner world, which I actually do have as a banner on the back at the moment, the inner game, because that's really where I want to be playing. Oh, hello. So today then, what we wanted to talk about, and it came up in one of our last podcasts, was about that 3 a.m. conversation in our heads. Well, 3 a.m. isn't fixed, but it could be any time in the early hours of the morning, which means that you can't go back to sleep. And it's a common thing that happens. And I know from my own experiences, particularly when I was working in corporate, was when things weren't going well, or when I didn't realize it was overwhelmed, but when there was so much going on, my unconscious mind would wake me up in the middle of the night to remind me of the things I'd forgotten, the things that were needing to be done the next day, or worse, things I handled badly. And we all do it from time to time. And replaying the conversation in your head. Oh, do you remember those ones? It's done and dusted. The other person's sleeping like a baby, and you're still having that. I'm talking about discussions. Some of them would have been probably bordering on arguments where you completely disagreed and you had to go off and do something else. This is what we want to talk about today. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I know from my perspective that I'm quite fortunate these days because I don't seem to have that many of them. So it's probably because I'm reaching a stage in my life where certain things that used to bother me don't bother me anymore. So maybe that helps. But there's a number of things that have always affected me. By one is obviously, if you wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and you can't get back to sleep, then there's that simple lack of sleep and the impact that has on you. There's the times when you're awake and you're mulling through things you've got to get done or backlogs, things like that, to the point where then you just go, sod it. I may as well go into work. I may as well go in. I know it's 5 o'clock in the morning, but I may as well go in and just get on and do it. And sometimes actually that's not a bad thing. So, it gets so clear. I think where it's at its most negative is when it undermines what you then do. I talk a lot about the conversations that we have with people in our heads and the arguments that we have with people in our heads, particularly where we've got meetings coming up or we've got difficult conversations coming up. And before we've even entered the room, before we've even got into that conversation, we've beaten ourselves because of the way that that argument went at 3:30, 4 o'clock this morning. And it has a very negative impact on our performance, I think.
It does. And in my world, when you're dealing with things like, the difficult conversation the next day, or as I said in my case, reliving something, which is a worse scenario, isn't it? It's just your deeper mind wanting to process something, but it can't do it while it's asleep. It needs you to be party to it, and it will wake you to go through it. And the beauty of sleep generally, and people may not realize this, is we're not passive in this. We are fully active in some way, because if we're asleep, all our organs can start to do whatever it is that they do. And there are certain things that they do at night that they just don't get time during the day because we're so busy. Our energy is so tied up with what we're doing, consciously or otherwise, it doesn't have time to do that work. Whereas when we're asleep, we get out of the way and it can do it. And of course, it's processing all the time, particularly memories and thoughts and all our cognitive stuff. There is a process that the brain goes through where it goes through it and says, "Oh, we've dealt with that." And literally it's like filing it on your computer. File that, file that, and it puts it into a deeper part of the mind. It's there if we need it, but it doesn't need us to access it all the time. But of course, sometimes it comes across something. It's like, this is unfinished. Unfinished is the key word here. The deeper mind doesn't like unfinished business. And it will then be looking at it and saying, well, what do I do with this? It's not finished. It can't go into the deeper mind because it's not finished. And I can't deal with it because you're asleep. Now, this is where fact and fiction may well go a bit amiss here. I reckon what it does is say, okay, well, I'll nudge you awake. I'll keep on until you wake up. Let's deal with that now. I don't have any scientific evidence for that, but it would make sense. If it's something it feels that you're feeling threatened about, because that's where the deeper mind sits. Are you safe? Are you included? It'll say, this hasn't been done. What are you doing about it? And you wake up in the middle of the night with the thoughts already racing around your head. You didn't handle that well. You need to go back and look at this. What can you do differently? And so it can be a real conundrum, and people don't realize that they are, as I say, they're not completely passive during the night. There is an active part going on. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I mean, it's interesting the different threads that you get on this from different perspectives because you're talking very much there about, in a sense, thinking about what's happened and going over that again. I feel I'm probably lucky, but I generally that's not the issue for me. I don't tend to lose too much sleep, quite literally, over what's happened because I'm one of these people who is like, okay, it's happened. Yeah, I wish it hadn't, or I wish it had gone better, or I wish I'd
Yeah.
done something different, or I wish I'd been so stupid, or whatever. But the reality is, it's happened. So therefore, my mind tends to fairly quickly go into, right, what are you going to do about it? What are you going to do next? Rather than worrying, sort of running back through it in my own mind. It's like, what are the lessons? Let's move on. So I suppose that's sort of classic all bed mentality for those of us who remember all our all bed conversations. The ones that yeah, I've historically always lost more sleep over. Either will be the ones where I've got something challenging coming up and I'm playing it out usually badly in my mind, so it underprepares me. So we'll talk about those in a moment. But there's another category where it's actually not you, yeah, there you are at 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning going through this huge problem, and you wake up at a few hours later and go, well, I don't know what that's about because it's not even real. It's not even a problem. I don't know why I was thinking like that at 3 or 4 in the morning because it actually makes my mind has made up a scenario that has kept me awake and got me thinking about it. And then I wake up a few hours later and go, well, that's not real. I don't know what that was about. And I don't know where that comes from. It's weird.
So let's explore that then, because it will have done it for a reason. So it's a bit like dreams. I dream a lot, dream a lot, and I have a lot of dreams around transport.
Right.
Crazy. Planes, trains, boats, usually sort of cruise type boats, or ferries. Those are the three key ones. And I've either missed it, I've raced to get on it, or I've missed my stop. So there is still that worry element that goes on. So there is an underlying thing. It's not worry per se, but the dream is about something else, but it's reminding me about worry. So if we think about what you're doing is you're replaying something in your head, it won't be about the thing you're thinking about. Remember, your brain wants to process your stuff and file it because while it's holding it in your head, it can't keep you safe. It's taking up valuable, is it RAM on your PC that keeps everything moving around in the background? It's taking up space and it doesn't want it. So it needs to close this tab down. And it can't until you've gone through it. But it might not do it logically. That's the problem. It won't be something that makes sense. It'll be anything that helps it work its way through. So when you work through that, did you come to a resolution or did you just give up and go to sleep? Or what happened when you were awake as a general? Because it won't be in every case, but
I mean, usually if I'm struggling to get back to sleep for whatever reason, really, but especially where my mind's gone into overdrive over something real or imagined, then I do have this. I end up telling myself off. Yeah, I will lie there going, would you pack this in? Stop being stupid. You're gonna have, you got up in 2 hours. Just go back to sleep. And I can sort of shut it down, but it takes me a long time to get to that point. I don't know why. I don't know why I can't shut it down straight away. But I don't. When I get to the point where I'm really annoyed with myself, I think because I'm still thinking about whatever I'm thinking about, then another part of my brain comes in and goes, right, you've been stupid. We need to shut this down. And I can then sort of turn over and go back to sleep.
that is
Um,
interesting.
but
Yeah.
I've wasted hour and a half, 2 hours getting to that point.
And it's interesting because Tony Robbins, an American, I'm going to call him a coach, but he does way more than that. He talks about the crazy eight. And if you can imagine a figure eight on its side, and he says we tend to sit in two distinct states, and one will be in let's see if we use your example of oh my God, what, have you worked this out? What's going on here? And it's very analytical, whatever, and it's going on and it's trying to work a problem out, but it's going around in circles perhaps or whatever. And it will you will stay there until this other part says, oh, okay, stop. And then everything goes over to the other side, which is when you go to sleep. So these two states will you will just swing between the two. So if, for example, you woke up at midnight with this conundrum and and then this part says, ah, I go to sleep, you're probably still early in your sleep cycle enough to be able to do that. But there's nothing to say it won't wake you up again with something different. So you won't necessarily connect the dots. I think this is the challenge we have when we're dealing with the deeper mind. We cannot always connect the dots. We need to ask ourselves some questions or understand it a little bit more. So it's a little bit more nebulous. It's not very logical because our deeper mind is not logical. So what you were working through probably had nothing to do with anything that you're completely aware of, but it will have been trying to process something at a deeper mind level and it didn't know how to deal with it. So consequently, your sleep cycle becomes broken and you wake up and then you're sitting with it. Then you can become consciously involved. The
I
shutter,
know,
let's go
I
back to
know some people have, yeah, we have different ways of dealing with this, which work for them. I've talked to people who, keep a notebook at the side of their bed and just scribble down something. I've talked to others who will get up and go make a cup of tea. I gave the example of literally just getting up and going to work and fixing the problem, whatever it may be. Is there a tried and tested route? Are there things that you recommend to people to try, or is it very much a matter of people just trying to sort of find their own way through it? Take a sleeping tablet and go, what's the way forward?
So I personally think we have to find our own one, which is why it's so frustrating that you read all this stuff out on the interweb and follow guidelines from doctors or whatever. But it's down to you and what works best for you because we absorb information very differently. So some of us will are very visual, so we have to see something. Some of us are more kinesthetic. We have to actually be doing or feeling something. And then those that are auditory. I won't bother with the other two senses because they're not quite so big. Although, having said that, I was with my granddaughter last week on holiday and she was really not in a good shape. Wouldn't, was quite anxious. So we gave her some warm milk because that releases certain things in the system. Warm milk is an old traditional remedy. So I think we have to find what works for us. So I have found sometimes when I've got something like that going around in my head is to get up and journal, to get up and the journaling is more getting your thoughts out on paper because I very often talk about thoughts in our head, particularly at 3 o'clock in the morning, will just keep going round like a train on a toy track, toy train on a circular track. We'll just keep going round and round and round and round because again the brain's got into a loop and it's like I don't know what to do. It just has no idea what to do with it, so it just keeps on until something happens, which means getting up to write is a good one. One of the things I very often talk to people about, they don't always take it on board, and that's okay because it's probably not right for them, is the whole tapping thing where you tap, say, um, forehead, the side of the eye, under the eye, associated in traditional Chinese medicine with the stomach. So interesting for those people who have stomach issues, and so on. And I'll put a link to a tapping solution there for people who want that. And the reason that works, I think, is because you're tapping into not just the kinesthetic, touchy-feely doing side, because you're doing something, aren't you? Not, but you're also potentially saying something in your head. So there's the auditory and the visual. Even if you've got your eyes shut, you can almost see your fingers going where it's going, can't you? So it's tapping into all three. Marvelous stuff. The other ones are I will very often put on a guided something, meditation, or put on an audiobook. There is a guy, love him. He he does reading things off of Wikipedia. I mean, the most boring things you'd ever know. He'll call something like steel, and then he'll talk about everything to do with steel. And it's on one of the apps that you can download. I'm trying to think what it is, but it's just brilliant. So you're listening to it. You've got a voice talking in your head. His voice is all right. Insight timer. Um, just inane stuff you don't need to listen to really, but he's just reading Wikipedia to you. That's enough to send you to sleep. What that's doing is keeping your brain active and satisfied that it's got something going on and concentrate on until it's like, oh, like you said, what are you doing? Go to sleep. Lots of different techniques. And actually, it would be really great to try and get a collection of them together so that people can find some of the ways to do it. Others might, go downstairs. I wouldn't recommend tea unless it's decaf. I would recommend, the milk or the herbal solutions, um, maybe with a shot of something if that's the way you need to go. But, generally try to avoid anything that's going to excite your system. Yes, there's lots of different ones, and I think we ought to try and, see how many we can get. Get 50 ways.
Do it.
Go to sleep.
I mean, I've got to say, I'm a very late recruit to peppermint tea, so I
Oh, right.
don't
Okay,
think
that's
finding
very
peppermint
good.
tea works.
Yeah, I did it because I have a caffeine problem. And of course I didn't realize that until I was being woken up in the early hours of the morning because I would drink tea till, bedtime almost. But of course the body needs to process it. So it'll wake you up. And now it keeps me awake for 2 days. Well, God, that's not good.
Well, I mean, I know I'm going to slightly off point, but maybe not. But yeah, I've had a real awakening in the last few weeks about caffeine because I mean, we talked about the medical challenges I've been through, which I'm
Mm.
clear behind me now. But whilst I was having the radiotherapy, I couldn't have caffeine, and I've always taken the view that I don't have a lot of caffeine anyway. I've always been very aware of just having 1 or 2 cups of coffee a day, tops, this sort of thing. But so first of all, coming off caffeine, I had withdrawal symptoms coming off it. To three
Yeah.
days of quite significant withdrawal symptoms. But also then going back onto it 4 or 5 weeks later, I mean, we went out on Friday night and I had a couple of drinks. I thought I'm going to be sensible. I'm working my way back still. So I then had a Pepsi Max. The brands of popular drink are available, and oh my word, yeah, I was like, I'm lying there
I
in
think,
bed, eyes wide open, like saucers, thinking, wow, this is off the back of one Pepsi, and it's sort of really hit home to me. It's modern life, isn't it? You drink coffee, you drink Coke, these sort of things, and then it really rammed it home to me the difference that it makes to my mind and my body by what I'm putting in it. Yeah, that it's like the peppermint tea thing, and I've started drinking cranberry juice, and I've always prided myself that I try to live a fairly healthy diet and lifestyle, but no, it sort of rammed it home to me that actually, the impact that you can have on your own behavior and your own body and how it's influenced by what you put in it. It's just a real
yeah,
lesson, and that's yeah. I don't know. It's just struck me there. Think, when you were talking about the things like what we drink, and just think about what you drink because you did oh get up, I'll have a cup of tea, but actually, are we making our problems worse by having that particular cup of tea, for
yes.
instance?
Yeah, absolutely. Just a little side note there. Pepsi and Coke and a number of these other disastrous energy drinks in inverted commas are full of sugar. And sugar
Mm.
is one of our biggest poisons, if you like, because of what it does to the body. And so that's worth bearing in mind. But I think it's a good point. And so I hear what you're saying. You don't tend to worry about what's gone on. I'm a big worry about what goes on because I've got some really good strategies about what's coming. So if we're talking about, what's coming up, what your brain is then doing, I guess, is planning and preparing what's going to happen in some way, particularly as you say, if it's a difficult conversation. And actually, I think he's called the sleep doctor in the US, Michael somebody or other. He talks about to get a good night's sleep, you have to start in the morning. crazy. What's that about? And he talks about, making sure that you get water, sunlight, movement, all early on in the day. You have a really good morning routine. And what I would suggest is that, when you get to work or if you can do it beforehand, just making a note of things that are bothering you out of your head, off of that circular loop, onto a piece of paper, which will allow you then to look at that when you need to. Because again, if the brain is trying to process stuff that it doesn't have an answer for, if you say, I will look at this, and you put a date next to it, like you would on anything. Paper is better, but if you have to put it on your computer, do that. But put it in when you're going to give it time, because the brain will be like, okay, we're going to look at it then. That's all right. It's got a plan. So it's a really good way to start the day. And then at the end of the night, he talks about making sure you've got a really good bedtime routine. I think he calls it sleep hygiene, where you're finishing your day up earlier on. So you stop drinking caffeinated drinks after a certain point. Maybe you stop eating after a certain point. We've got a tendency to eat late. And unfortunately, unlike our Mediterranean cousins, they tend to be heavier meals as well if we're not careful. Um, and then, sort of, by the time you've done you cleaned your teeth, you got the lights down low in the bedroom, you make sure it's not too hot. We're in for a bit of a hot spell coming up, so it's always a bit of a challenge. And, the other thing is to finally, again, get out of your head the things that are bothering you about tomorrow or that have been, and just make sure you've got a plan for them. It sounds really simple, but it really helps because the brain just needs an answer.
Yeah, it highlights that you do have to work at it, doesn't it? I,
Yeah.
I think one of the things that intrigues me is,
Mm.
yeah, we hear athletes, top athletes, talk an awful lot about how they visualize success. They run the race in their mind before the race starts. They, hurdle the hurdles before the race starts. I think at this 3 o'clock in the morning thing, a lot of us visualize failure. Yeah, we've got a big meeting the next morning. We've got a difficult conversation that coming up the next day, the next week. And we run that through in our minds, but we don't seem to run it through in a positive way. We don't lie there and think, right, this is what I'm going to do and this is how I'm going to make it work out my way. Instead, we go, okay, well, I'm going to say this and they're not going to like it. So they're going to do this. And then they're going to ask me this question and I'm not going to have an answer to that. And then I'm going to tell them how much it's going to cost and they're really not going to like that. And we beat it, we build up what we see as a potentially difficult meeting. We build up into a really difficult meeting and inevitably a potential failure. Now, invariably, the next day, the next week, we go into that meeting and we go, okay, this is what we think you should do. And the client goes, yeah, okay. Yeah, I think, okay, well, why did I lose all that sleep then? But we undermine our own position in advance, don't we? And a lot of times, I think we know we're doing it, but at 3 o'clock in the morning, we can't stop ourselves. We can't switch it off.
Yeah, because at 3 o'clock in the morning, we're being run more by the deeper mind than we are this mind, because this may not have actually managed to catch up at that point. It wants to sleep, it's tired, and do all the stuff that it does. And the deeper mind is already tidying up and sorting out and clearing out. And when I talk about that, I'm talking about, cellular debris and making sure that the liver's been doing its detox and the kidneys are doing what they do. So I think it's interesting because the deeper mind, and when I talk about the deeper mind, I'm talking your primitive mind for those of you who have listened to our other recordings. It's the part that's keeping you alive. And so its first thing is to keep you safe. And of course, it's primed, therefore, from the get-go to deal with negativity because it needs to look at it's like a risk analysis of what could go wrong and how are you going to handle it. And that's its primary state really. It's where it works from, which is why it's so difficult to be positive, but you can reprogram it. It just takes time if you do it on your own, but it can be done. So when you have these thoughts, when your conscious mind is starting to kick in, you can say, hold on, is that true? And if it's true, how can I make it a better outcome for us both? Because obviously we want a win-win type thing for most of us anyway. It's not about trampling on the other person. It's about getting the result because invariably it's with a client or a loved one, isn't it? Let's be honest. Not the person on the bus who treads on your foot. So yeah, I think it's about learning on some level to start to question what is going through our head. And that sounds easy, but it's a little tough because you've got to become aware of it first. And you might not always be aware of the negative patterns you're going through. I see a lot of people with stress and anxiety, and one person at the moment who has taken it to quite an extreme at the moment and has fear of fear. He's, gone down a very deep rabbit hole there. It's a learning. And the beauty of learnings is you can unlearn them and relearn something else. It's like upgrading your software. And we just need to start recognizing when we have got ourselves in a spiral, and how to get out of it is by challenging it, using this wonderful cognitive thinking mind that you've developed to ask yourself the tough questions. Is that true? Is that the only solution? What else or what other options are there? Because the brain will come back with answers. Maybe not immediately, but if you listen, it'll come back with some other answers that are better for you.
It's interesting because the author Dean Koontz has a character who's for the life I can't remember what their name is at the moment. It's a little while since I've read one of their books, but this character has various health conditions that are impacted by sunlight, and so they
Hmm.
live their life at night. They've flipped it around. So nighttime is when they're up and about and away. And it's a great scenario for a whole series of books. But it rams home that point that there is like daytime and nighttime are different worlds.
Yes.
You know, people behave differently, things happen differently. Things can be accessed. They're just, I think we live in a 24/7 world now, don't we? So they're probably less, there's a bigger grey area between the two than there previously was. If you go back to generations before us, then they lived their life by the sun because they had to. And then as soon as the sun went down, everybody went to bed. And when the sun came up, everyone went to work. Well, now we don't have that. But they are interesting reads because they do ram home this point that nighttime is different to daytime. And I think it's a useful thing for us to remember because whatever has happened overnight, from what you're, listening to you talk now, essentially our brain is in charge overnight. It's telling us what we're going to think about and all the rest of it. When we then get through to dawn, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, whenever it is, your day starts. That's almost like that's our opportunity for us to regain control. Because now our body's fully alert. We've got more tools to go into our brain and go, well, hang on a moment, and you've had your say overnight.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to start taking a bit more control. And it's rather like you're saying there about first in the morning is the opportunity to get better sleep the following night. But it's also an opportunity to say, okay, well, regardless of what I was thinking overnight, I'm now back in the real world. This is where I can start to regain control. So any negativity I've had overnight, I can't fix the sleeplessness. If I'm tired, I'm tired. Although I guess I can. I can still look at, okay, I should recognize that I'm tired. Therefore, do I need to amend my day? Do I need to amend my targets for the day? Because I reckon, do I need to be aware when I'm dealing with others that I'm tired? So just give that a bit of thought. So
Point. Yes.
it is an opportunity. We sit there at breakfast or whenever we're doing it, it is an opportunity for us to go, right, night time's done. Now I'm in the day. The days where I'm in charge, I can now regain control.
Mm. And I love what you said, and I'm conscious that we're coming to the end of our time here on this particular podcast. But I want to mention a couple of people. One is a guy called, I think, Wayne Dyer. I'm not sure if he was a Dr. Wayne Dyer, but or not a medical doctor. And somebody else who I listen a lot to is Louise Hay, who says you can heal yourself. Both of them advocate. Well, one of them advocates positive affirmations, and the other one talks about the things we tell ourselves. And the idea is that when you go to sleep at night, you start to prime your sleep with positive statements, whatever they may be. And then when you wake in the morning, you talk positively to yourself. Great, I've got a brand new day ahead of me. There are going to be opportunities out there for me, and I'm going to be I'm going to be really, in a good mood. What I don't know exactly. You'd need to decide your own ones. And then likewise at night, something's different. I'm going to sleep well. You're not going to do it straight away. But they say that if you do this every morning and every night, so we're not talking hours here. One of them says, think of 10 things you can be grateful for. You can do that while you clean your teeth, can't you? Five things that, five people that you've had a challenge with, send them love in your head or, wherever. And then one thing that you want to achieve today. It's as simple as that. If you do that, you start to shift the way your brain is thinking. Because remember, it's working from instinct, a bio chemical, mechanical, magnetic, electrochemical stuff. It's working with what it has learned, but not right now. We may not realize it. We're living in the 21st century. Our primitive mind is living however far back it needs to go to keep us safe. And it doesn't know, it doesn't understand time. So if we can start to do that, we can start to prime it more effectively to look for the positives. So maybe we could wake at 3 in the morning and have brilliant ideas. And let me tell you, I've done that. When you woke up, I was like, oh, that's a great idea. I can't let that one go. So it's possible, I think, is what we need to be aware of. Those thoughts that we've had in the past where it has kept us awake because we're either like I was, fretting over what you've done, said, and been, or worrying about how something is going to go and how you're going to handle it. It doesn't matter. The principle is it's trying to keep you safe. So let's put in thoughts of safety. I am constantly, I'm constantly looking out for myself. I've got the learnings. I know what I'm going to be doing. And when I don't, I have a plan, and whatever that plan might be. Space to think properly. Look them up. YouTube it. 2 minutes in some of those cases. So it's worth it just to get an idea of what you can do, because we've got to make this personal, because it's
Yeah,
not about what Wayne Dyer says or Louise Hay or some other advocates. I think Steve Bartlett has talked about this as well. Diary of a CEO.
yeah.
So
One
it's
one things that comes across with all of those people is the way that it's about taking back control. You know, and I think I talked earlier about generations before. With to go to sleep when you're tired and to get up when you're not is a fairly simple approach, and it's one thing that we've artificially lost that because we got into this 9 to 5 mentality and got to be up at this time. And actually, again, in the world we live in today, we don't have to do that. COVID showed us that we can work in all sorts of different ways. And if, I'm very fortunate these days. I mean, I rarely have to set the alarm for 8 o'clock in the morning. Now, I've got plenty of work to do and I could do, but do you know what? I can make it work this way. And, it's a lot of this is about taking back control of your day, isn't it?
of you. Taking
Mm.
back control
Yeah.
of you, that inner stuff. So you just said something there, and I'm just going to make a note at the end of it. I think that could be another podcast conversation. There was something you said there. Let me just see what it might have been. Something about where we've artificially lost and working that
Yeah.
going to work 9 to 5. There's a
Th-
whole
Those, it's those natural cycles that we used to have.
natural cycles.
Yeah.
That's what we've lost.
Mm.
Oh, Richard, so I've probably talked way too much on that, but I think the insights were really useful from your perspective, and something for people to think about. How can they start to do something about something that they're worried about in the future? And yes, looking to reset that in the future is really how powerful. And there are ways to do that. Visualizing it, just like the sports people do, playing out in their heads. That is positive. Do that before you go to sleep. Play out your next day in your head before you go to sleep. And then your unconscious mind might just be happier. Lovely. Thank you so much.
Actually, I enjoyed that. Thank you.
Yes, me too.